again, intrepid folk, on your foray into the world of assessment for learning and standards-based grading. In this video, I want to talk about what assessment for learning actually looks like in my room, what I actually do on a day-to-day basis that I call assessment for learning. Odds are you are already, if you're a teacher, you are already doing lots of things that fall into this category. Whenever people say, oh, you need to have assessment for learning practice, it's something new that teachers have to learn and do, but not really. It's more of a mental shift, I think, than actually more stuff that you need to do in your classroom. So as I mentioned in the last video, the first thing that's really big in assessment for learning is the differentiation between formative assessments and summative assessments. In my opinion, formative assessments are by far the most important thing. I kind of tend to chunk them into two categories, formative and diagnostic. Formative is anything practice-wise. So these are your practice worksheets, your homework, your independent practice in class, guided practice, whatever you want to call it. But it's forming that knowledge. It's something you do with the students, they do with each other. I do a ton of group practice in my class. It's a big thing in my room. Oftentimes the kids teach each other better than I teach them. They speak their own language, and it works out well. Diagnostics, as I call them, are your pop quizzes. Things that are assessment-like, but still are forming that knowledge. It's not that goal point just yet. Then your summative assessments are things like lab write-ups, presentations, tests, in whatever form you choose for them to take. In that vein, I'm going to kind of go through again how I do these practices. Formative assessments, like I said, are a big deal, but they are not graded. And let me specify. They are not scored to where they are given a grade that goes in the grade book that then in turn affects their term grade. That's not how formative assessments work. Just like you're not giving a grade on your basketball practice, or nobody holds up a scorecard after you do a trick with a hula hoop and gives you a score. It's just practice. But it's necessary. So I do not give homework grades in my class at all. If I assign a homework problem the next day, it may be the bell ringer, meaning I'll go over it when the bell rings. Bell ringer, the bell it ringeth. But I don't give it a grade. If the student chooses not to do it and it becomes a regular problem, that is a behavioral issue. It has a behavioral consequence, not a grade consequence. So if they don't do it, it's not a 0 that goes in the grade book, because that's grades as a penalty, assessment as a penalty. It's not what we're going for here. We're going for assessment for learning, to encourage learning. And 0s don't encourage anybody. I don't know where we got that idea, but 0s just discourage folk. So I don't do that. Also, with homework, how do I know who did it? If I send a worksheet home with a kiddo, it could have been Uncle Bill, who has a PhD in chemistry, that did it, or Big Brother, who's majoring in chemical engineering in college, or they copied it off of somebody as soon as they came in the room. I would rather them try and bomb it, and then me help them through it the next day, than to collect it for a grade, because again, why am I giving it a grade when I don't know if the student did it? If the grade is supposed to be for the student, I should know that the student did it. Also, students are still learning. You shouldn't be assessing yet. If you take an assessment and everybody gets terrible grades, odds are you assessed too soon. So, something to be careful of, and that's where those homework informatives are nice, because it gives you an idea where the kiddos are, whether they need more practice, some behavioral consequences need to be implemented because they're not holding up their end of the bargain, or maybe it's just not clear. We need another example. Another way that I do formative assessments is what I dub the diagnostics, because it's just what it sounds like. It diagnoses where the students are in that learning process. For me, these are pop quizzes. They can be as simple as a sticky note. I love sticky notes. If you don't use them, you should. You put a problem up on the board, student does the problem, sticks the sticky note on the door. I'm short, so they love sticking them where I can't reach. It makes everybody laugh. But it gives me an idea of what the student can do on their own. It can be a 5-question quiz, 10-question quiz. Doesn't matter. But it is an assessment-like situation where the student is doing the work on their own. No work from me, none from buddies, none from book, none from notes. Just you and your brain, as I like to say. And it's like a test. So it diagnoses where they actually are. Because oftentimes students do great on the homework, but as soon as I take away all those crutches, suddenly they're not doing so good. So pop quizzes are a huge part of my regular classroom activities. But again, they don't impact your grade, so you have nothing to lose. Try the problem. Make it up. I always tell the kids, don't leave it blank. Make it up, because half the time, they make it up right. So always try, especially on the pop quizzes. Again, what do you have to lose? Only to gain when we walk through it and you see what you did wrong compared to what you actually wrote on your test. Let's see. I do put pop quizzes in the grade book, quote unquote, but they don't count towards the term grade. I do that simply as a tracking mechanism so that I can see a student, maybe they're getting good grade, good grade, good grade, bad grade. That tells me something happened. That kid and I need to have a nice little conversation. Maybe something's going on at home. Maybe the new concept just whoop. Maybe they had a bad day. But all of these are good conversations to have with the student, and that's the biggest part of formative assessments, is to open that door of communication between the student and the teacher, between the parent and the student, between the parent and the teacher. But it gives us all somewhere to start in order to say, well, the student's been doing great and all of a sudden we dropped off. What happened? Maybe their girlfriend broke up with them. Maybe the dog died. Maybe mom and dad are having a rough time. But those are all useful things for a teacher to know, because sometimes it's academic, sometimes it's personal. And we have to remember that kids are people too. School is not their only existence, and it has an impact on academia. Let's see. This also helps to emphasize learning as a process. The fact that you screw up, it's fine. We'll try again. I don't care if it takes you 1 time or 25 times. My rule in my classroom is 3. You have to show me you can do something 3 separate times before I stop bugging you. Once you show me 3 times, I'm good. And that allows your real go-getters to actually not have to do the homework when they already get this. It's just more busy work. But it also allows your students that are struggling the comfort of knowing that they can try again. It's okay if it takes you a few more tries. There is no penalty for that. In fact, I encourage it. Try it again. Retakes are a big part of this, and this is something a lot of teachers I know are a little bit skittish of, and I don't blame you. When I first started doing this, everybody takes retakes after the first test, or wants to after they bomb the first test, because everybody hears, oh, no homework, I'm not going to do it. And then the first test rolls around and they all don't get the grade that they wanted. So they kind of see the connection of homework. Heck, by the middle of the year, I usually have students asking for more practice because they see that connection. But I digress. Retakes, they have a price. You don't get to try a trick again or have the... I don't play sports, so I can't even think of what it is. Court time, for lack of a better word, unless you prove that you deserve it. You have to run more laps, or do more practice drills, or do more practice on your own, whatever the case may be. Musical instrument, basketball, dance, it's all the same. And it's the same with retakes in my classroom. If you want to do a retake, you have to show me that you've learned more, that you've done more. If you weren't doing those bell ringers, maybe you need to start showing them to me. You have to hold up your end of the bargain. Maybe it's homework. I give you a few extra practice problems for you to bring back to me and for us to talk about. Maybe before school, after school. It varies depending on the students. I've got a retake ticket that I don't have with me. I should have that, sorry. If you want to see it, let me know and I'll make another video. But it allows me to create an individualized process for that student to retake the test. It is a new test, same material, same difficulty level, but it is a new series of assessment for those particular standards, that particular topic. So it's not like you can take the first test just to see what it's like and then take the next one. It's not the same test. It's a different, completely different series of questions. How you do this in your own classroom, if you're a teacher, if you want to keep all the tests so that you only have to make 1 retake, that's fine. I teach at a very small school, so I generally make retakes individual to the student, but I have the luxury of that kind of time since I don't have 350 kids in a day. But again, that's how you have to tweak this system to work for you. Let's see, something else I've already mentioned that's big in assessment for learning is making sure that the assessments are for learning, not as a behavioral punishment. Again, those pop quizzes, you have misbehaved. Take out a piece of paper. It's a punishment. You shouldn't do that. Which again is hard, and you have to come up with some means of behavioral consequences for behavioral actions. Things like late work. Again, as I said, zeros don't motivate anybody. So you have to come up with some means to have a behavioral consequence for that behavioral issue. Turning in late work, that's not academic. That has nothing to do with whether or not they can do the topic. I would rather them turn in the assignment half done and me give them feedback on what they have done, and for them to not turn it in at all, simply because homework's purpose is the feedback, not the grade itself. When it comes to things like an English paper or a lab report, that you're going to have to determine for yourself. As it currently stands, I do not have a means to assign both a behavioral grade and an academic grade. So what I have done is actually include a behavioral standard, if you will, for laboratory work. That includes being on time, neatness, things like that, that are important in the professional world if you should go into some kind of research, but aren't academic factors per se. For now, I have to combine them. This is unfortunate. I don't like it, but since the world at large is still kind of using multiple systems, it's what I have to do for now. If you read Marzano, Kenner, Connor, any of those names that I mentioned in the first video, they will also stress the importance of keeping behavior and academia separate. But you also have to do what works in the school district where you are. So that's why I have to do that for now. Let's see. What other things did I want to mention? As I said, what it looks like in my room. Problems assigned for homework today tend to become the bell ringer for tomorrow. If you don't have it done, I'm not going to wait. I'm going to go over the problem when the bell rings. That's what's called a bell ringer. Again, behavioral consequences for behavioral issues. I do tons of practice days, loads of practice days, again, to encourage that learning as a process. I'll teach a new topic, we'll practice it for maybe that day, maybe one more, and then I'll give them a quiz. If everybody gets terrible grades, obviously I need to do some more guided practice with the kiddos. If everybody gets high grades, then it's time to move on. If you notice just one or two students lagging behind, that again opens that door for conversation between you and the other student. So again, a lot of these things are probably concepts you're already using in your classroom if you're a teacher. So this is nothing new, but perhaps that learning as a continuous process, looking for those doorways to conversation with a student might be a slightly different thought process for you. And I hope this gives you a little bit of food for thought in your own practices and how this looks in your classroom. So when someone says, do you do assessment for learning? You can say, yes, I do this, this, and this. And if you don't, it gives you somewhere to start. My recommendations for somewhere to start, as I was saying, are lots of formative assessments that do not affect term grade, retakes for tests and assessments, and behavioral consequences for behavioral issues. Those are kind of my big three assessments or three suggestions for somewhere to start. So I hope that is enlightening. If you have any questions, please feel free to message me on YouTube or on Twitter, SuperChemLady, no weird spellings, all one word. Or leave them in the comments below. Again, this is my interpretation, my system, my classroom, so please don't feel like I'm trying to dictate. But I hope it has given you some food for thought. So, I will see you next time. Take care.